You know that feeling when you're in a discussion with someone and you lay out a perfectly constructed, completely logical sequence of
Oh,
facts?
I know exactly where you're going with this.
Right, like A leads to B and B leads to C. The progression is just airtight.
Yeah.
You present this undeniable truth on a silver platter, waiting for that satisfying click of mutual understanding.
Yeah, that aha moment.
Exactly. But instead, they just stare blankly at you, they completely reject C, and aggressively argue, potato.
It is the impenetrable wall of irrationality.
Mm.
And it is arguably, well, one of the most universally exhausting human experiences.
It makes you want to pull your hair out. But what if, instead of getting frustrated by that maddening, logic-defying absurdity, you framed it, what if you took that exact moment of cognitive dissonance, hung it on a wall, and called it art?
Which is such a wild concept.
It really is, and that is the exact mission of the pitch notes we are doing a deep dive on today. We're unpacking the source material for a proposed new project, a season titled The Neurological Wall.
Right, which is a follow-up to a previous work called Hundekiks.
Exactly, and I want to set the tone right away for you listening because you appreciate unapologetic intellectual exploration. We really need to brace ourselves for the uncompromising nature of these notes.
Oh, absolutely. The creator's vision operates right at this incredibly volatile intersection of clear, cold logic and totally irrational human behavior.
It's raw.
So raw, it's a complete rejection of neurotypical biases. Basically, it operates as a masterclass in how to take the absolute frustration of dealing with illogical people and, use it as raw fuel for originality.
So let's start right where the creator starts, which is with the concept of the muse. Because historically, we think of a muse as something aspirational, right?
Yeah, like a breathtaking landscape or profound love.
Right, some abstract ideal of beauty. But the creator of these notes inverts that entirely. They propose a muse born purely out of irritation and illogic.
Yeah, the pitch introduces this archetype they call Thomas.
Ah, yes, good old Thomas.
Right. Now, Thomas represents those highly irrational, stubbornly illogical people we just talked about. The people who argue potato when you hand them a math equation.
Yeah.
And the argument here is that you should use Thomas and his profound lack of logic as the driving force for your creative engine. Thomas involuntarily becomes a living museum for the creator's art.
I have to pause here, though, because my immediate reaction to that is, well, isn't that just incredibly condescending?
It definitely sounds like it at first.
I mean, it feels arrogant to look at someone you disagree with and say, I'm going to use your stupidity as my muse.
What's fascinating here is that it only sounds incredibly arrogant if you view it through the lens of traditional social etiquette. But let's look at the actual psychological mechanics of what the creator is proposing.
Okay, I'm tracking.
When you engage with a Thomas on his level, you exhaust yourself. You burn your cognitive energy trying to force logic into a system that completely rejects it.
Right.
So by elevating Thomas to a muse, you are executing a form of conscious detachment.
Okay, so it's less about superiority and more about, like, survival, kind of like mental judo.
Mental judo, I love that.
Yeah, like instead of meeting their irrational force with your own logical force, which results in a bruised ego and a massive headache, you step off the line of attack. You let their absurdity rush right past you, and you just observe it. You effectively turn them into a museum exhibit.
Precisely. You neutralize the threat to your own sanity. You're no longer a victim of their illogic, you are a curator of it.
Wow.
And that really establishes the raw tone of the neurological wall right out of the gate. The creator is explicitly stating that the goal of this project is not to find common ground.
No hand-holding.
Exactly, no reaching across the aisle. It is simply about documenting the absurd in its natural habitat without letting it destroy your peace of mind.
But okay, if we are going to put Thomas in an exhibit and observe him, we have to ask why he is acting this way in the first place. Like, is this person actively choosing to be stubborn? Are they just being malicious? Or is there a biological wall we're hitting here?
That's the million-dollar question. And the pitch notes provide a stark diagnosis that moves far beyond just behavioral quirks. They point to what they call neurological incompatibility.
Neurological incompatibility.
Yes, the creator argues that we aren't just dealing with differing opinions here, we are dealing with hardware problem. Our brains are quite literally cabled differently.
Okay, let's unpack this, because hardware problem sounds like a very convenient excuse to avoid doing the hard work of communication.
How so?
Well, If I write a bad script, or if I fail to explain a concept clearly, I can't just throw my hands up and say, well, my audience lacks the neurological hardware to understand my genius. Isn't the burden of communication on the person delivering the message?
In a standard pedagogical environment, sure. We have this comforting, deeply entrenched societal belief that if we just explain things better, find the right words, the right metaphor, everyone can understand each other. But the creator of the neurological wall is shattering that illusion. Let's step away from the idea of smart versus stupid and look at it mechanically. Imagine an AM radio receiver.
Oh, okay.
You can blast an FM signal at it all day long. You can crank up the volume, you can articulate the broadcast perfectly, but the receiver physically lacks the capability to decode the frequency. It will only ever produce static.
Wait, so if they literally lack the software, is communication just a total lost cause? Are we essentially trying to run a Mac program on a PC?
That is exactly it. And the crucial distinction made in the notes is that this has nothing to do with general intelligence.
Really?
Yeah. A person can have a staggering IQ. They can be a brilliant surgeon or an expert engineer. But if they lack the specific neurological software to grasp a highly abstract concept outside their domain, they will fail to process it. They live in an entirely closed-off conceptual world.
Man, that makes the reality of daily interactions feel incredibly daunting. Because if the gap between two people is fundamental, if it's a matter of incompatible neurological cabling, then arguing is practically delusional.
It is.
You are standing there trying to tune an AM radio to an FM station, getting mad at the static. But wait, if the receiver gets a signal it cannot process, it doesn't just quietly shut down and apologize for the inconvenience. What happens when that FM signal hits the AM radio?
It generates defensive noise. The notes describe a very specific reaction that occurs when a closed conceptual bubble is threatened by external, undeniable logic. The individual doesn't surrender to the logic, they double down to protect their reality.
Which brings us to a really fascinating concept in the pitch, the snowy syndrome.
Yes, the snowy syndrome.
The creator observes that people have become so delicate, so aggressively fragile in their personal worldviews, that they experience a form of extreme solipsism. Like they literally forget a basic mathematical reality, that they are just one single organism out of billions. They need a serious lesson in grounding.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the psychology behind the snowy syndrome makes perfect sense as a defense mechanism. Think about how the human ego operates in a closed system. When your worldview is the only worldview you possess the software to comprehend, it doesn't just feel like an opinion, it feels like the literal fabric of reality.
Wow.
Therefore, any contradiction, any pure logic that disrupts that worldview isn't processed as a different perspective. The ego processes it as a physical threat to existence. The fragility is a symptom of an ego operating in a vacuum.
So when you present them with that undeniable A to B to C logic, their brain's threat detection system just goes haywire.
Yes,
They feel cornered. And that fragility breeds what the creator brilliantly calls comical firmness.
The inverse relationship between logic and certainty.
Yes. It's the observation that people plant their feet the hardest when they have absolutely no ground to stand on. They become adamantly, aggressively certain precisely when they are being the absolute most illogical.
Absurd.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Is calling their absolute certainty comical a way to disarm them? Like, is finding it entertaining the only way to survive interacting with a brick wall?
I think it is a highly evolved survival strategy because anger implies an expectation. If you get angry at Thomas for not understanding, it means on some level you still believe he should be able to understand.
You're still demanding that the AM radio play the FM broadcast.
Exactly. But when you transition to finding the firmness comical, you drop the expectation. You accept the reality of the neurological incompatibility.
Yeah.
You are observing the static and finding the pattern amusing rather than infuriating.
Okay, so if we accept that we cannot explain things better because of the hardware issue, and we accept that pushing harder just triggers the snowy syndrome and comical firmness, how on earth does the creator propose we actually communicate? Do we just, I don't know, stop talking to people?
Well, no. The solution proposed in the Neurological Wall is much more radical. It is the implementation of what the notes call non-bias 3, or non-bias communication.
Non-biased communication.
Yes. This involves completely stripping away the neurotypical filters that govern almost all human interaction.
Okay, let's look at what that actually means in practice. Because society runs on neurotypical biases. We run on the polite little lies, the softened blows, the social grease that keeps gears turning without sparking.
And the creator argues that this social grease is exactly what obscures the truth. The pitch specifically points to autism and direct speech as the model for non-BIA3 communication.
Interesting.
Because neurotypical communication is heavily encoded, it relies on unwritten rules, emotional catering, subtext, and tone management. By the time a hard truth makes it through that massive filtering system, which is designed specifically to protect fragile egos, it is so diluted that it's practically meaningless.
It's like taking off the polarized sunglasses of social etiquette.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, like it might be blindingly bright and uncomfortable at first, but you finally see the true, unfiltered colors of reality.
That's a perfect analogy. And the creator elevates this directness from what society sees as a social faux pas into an intellectual virtue. They're arguing that truth shouldn't have to put on a costume to be palatable. If the truth triggers someone's snowy syndrome, that is a reflection of their fragile hardware, not a flaw in the transmission of the truth.
That is an incredibly rebellious stance, but it also comes with massive collateral damage, right?
Basically.
If you walk through the world communicating with zero neurotypical bias, just speaking unfiltered, non-BIA3 truth to people with fragile worldviews, you're going to attract a tidal wave of backlash. The noise from the crowd is going to be deafening.
Absolutely.
So how does an artist, or really anyone applying this philosophy, protect their vision from that kind of assault?
That brings us to the core manifesto of the entire project. There is a phrase in the pitch notes that serves as a shield against that backlash.
Yeah.
The quote is, "I have no use for your opinion."
Wow. Okay, that's blunt.
It is. It is the deliberate practice art of ignoring irrelevant feedback. The creator recognizes that if you are building something truly original, you cannot operate by committee. You have to aggressively sort through the incoming noise and discard anything that doesn't actually serve the logic of the work.
Which ties into why the Neurological Wall is being pitched as a follow-up to Hundekiks.
Exactly. Hundekiks already started this conversation, and now the creator is doing a status check on what it requires to create something truly original in a world full of copies and illogical arguments.
So this new season needs to be even rawer.
Yes. To create something unprecedented, you must become immune to the opinions of those who only understand precedent.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here. What does this all mean for the creator? Like, where is the line between fiercely protecting your creative vision from noise and accidentally building your own closed world bubble that you accuse others of having?
That's the trap, right?
Yeah. If you walk around saying, I have no use for your opinion, aren't you just adopting the exact same solipsism you accused Thomas of having?
It's a brilliant distinction to demand. But if we dig into the mechanics of the creator's argument, they aren't advocating for a blind blanket dismissal of all feedback. The key word here is irrelevant feedback. It requires a highly analytical sorting process. It is a necessary survival tactic for maintaining an uncompromising original voice.
So how do you sort it? How do you know what to ignore and what to listen to?
You evaluate the source's software. If someone is criticizing the work because they literally lack the conceptual framework to understand it, if their critique is born from a defensive need to protect their own fragile ego from a reality they can't process, then their feedback isn't a valid critique.
It's merely a symptom of their incompatibility.
Precisely. If you try to incorporate feedback from an AM radio into your FM broadcast, you just corrupt your own signal. You protect the soul of the work by refusing to let it be diluted by people who don't even possess the neurological receptors to understand the language you are speaking.
This entire framework is intensely liberating because, we are constantly bombarded by noise. We are surrounded by bad faith arguments and people who just flat out refuse to engage with basic logic.
It is cognitively exhausting.
It is. But once you accept the reality of the hardware problem, the burden is lifted. You no longer have to fix the radio. You just have to observe it playing it static.
Exactly.
So to tie this all together for you listening, we started with this wild idea of using irrational people as muses. We diagnosed the hardware issue of neurological incompatibility, stripped away neurotypical biases with non-BIA3 communication, and ended with a blueprint for protecting pure, original thought from the noise of the crowd.
It's a complete paradigm shift. It transforms the world from a frustrating debate into a vast, slightly absurd laboratory.
And that leads to a really fascinating, actionable takeaway for you as you go about the rest of your day. This deep dive gives you a framework for how to navigate a world full of noise without losing your patience. So, if we actively adopt this mindset, what happens? The next time you find yourself hitting that impenetrable wall and someone yells, "Potato!" instead of letting your blood pressure spike, stop. Observe the static.
Mm.
And ask yourself, what could I build out of this very next infuriating conversation?